The stagecoach carrying Winifred Pierce hit a rock so hard she thought her teeth might shake loose from her skull. And when she finally stepped down onto the dusty main street of Winnemucca, Nevada in the scorching heat of July 1883, she wondered if her father had finally lost his mind sending her to this God-forsaken place. Winifred's silk traveling dress, imported from Paris and worth more than most families in this town probably earned in a year, was now coated in a fine layer of dust that made her want to weep. Her maid, Eleanor, stepped down behind her looking equally miserable and considerably more terrified. The streets of Winnemucca were nothing like San Francisco, where Winifred had spent the last 3 years finishing her education at the finest finishing school money could buy. Here, wooden buildings lined dirt roads, horses stood tied to hitching posts, and men in dusty work clothes walked past without even the courtesy of tipping their hats. "Miss Pierce, perhaps we should inquire about accommodations," Eleanor suggested nervously, clutching her traveling case like it might protect her from this wild frontier town. Winifred straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin, a habit her mother had drilled into her before the fever took her 5 years ago. Pierce women did not show weakness, did not complain, and certainly did not let the world see them falter. Even if that world was now a dusty Nevada mining town, instead of the marble halls of her father's San Francisco mansion. "The hotel is just there," Winifred said, pointing to a 2-story building with a sign that read Winnemucca Hotel in fading paint. "Father's telegram said he would meet us here within the week. He is inspecting the silver mines he purchased in the area." What her father had not mentioned in his telegram was why he had insisted she come to Nevada at all. Winifred suspected it had something to do with Marcus Thornton, the railroad magnate's son who had been calling on her with increasing frequency. Marcus was handsome enough, wealthy beyond measure, and utterly boring. Every conversation with him felt like watching paint dry, and the thought of spending the rest of her life nodding politely while he discussed stock prices and railway expansion made her want to scream. The hotel lobby was surprisingly clean, with polished wood floors and curtains that looked almost new. A middle-aged woman behind the desk looked up with a smile that seemed genuine. "You must be Miss Pierce," the woman said. "Your father sent word ahead. I'm Mrs. Henderson. I have our best rooms prepared for you and your companion." "Thank you," Winifred said, relieved to find some civilized hospitality. "Might there be somewhere we could get a proper meal? The dining room serves until 8. I'll have hot water sent up for baths." "You look like you have had a long journey." That was an understatement. 3 days on a train from San Francisco to Reno, then another full day in that wretched stagecoach, bouncing over roads that barely deserved the name. Every muscle in Winifred's body ached, and she wanted nothing more than to sink into a hot bath and pretend she was back in civilization. The room was smaller than her dressing closet back home, but it was clean and the bed looked comfortable. Eleanor immediately began unpacking while Winifred moved to the window, looking out over the main street. The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon, painting the desert landscape in shades of orange and gold that were, she had to admit, rather beautiful in their own harsh way. A commotion below caught her attention. A group of cowboys had just ridden into town, their horses kicking up dust as they came to a stop in front of what appeared to be a saloon. The men were covered in dirt and sweat, clearly just come from a long day's work. One of them swung down from his horse with an easy grace that made Winifred pause. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that needed cutting. Even from her window, she could see the way the other men deferred to him, how they waited for him to speak before heading into the saloon. "Miss Winifred, your bath is ready," Eleanor called, and Winifred turned away from the window, dismissing the cowboy from her thoughts. After the bath and a surprisingly decent meal of roasted chicken and vegetables, Winifred felt almost human again. She retired to her room early, exhausted from the journey, and fell asleep to the distant sounds of piano music and laughter from the saloon down the street. The next morning dawned bright and already warm. Winifred dressed in one of her simpler day dresses, though even her simplest dress was finer than what most women in Winnemucca probably owned. She left Alina sleeping and ventured downstairs, thinking to take a walk and see more of the town in daylight. Mrs. Henderson was already at the desk. "Good morning, Miss Pierce. You are up early." "I have never been one to sleep late," Winifred replied. "Is there a shop where I might purchase a book? I forgot to bring enough reading material." "There is a general store 2 buildings down. Mr. Patterson keeps a small selection of books and newspapers. Though I should warn you, miss, it might be best to wait until later in the morning. The streets can be a bit rough this early with all the ranch hands and miners about." Winifred smiled. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Henderson, but I assure you I am quite capable of walking 2 buildings down a street." She regretted her confidence about 3 minutes later when she stepped out onto the wooden sidewalk and nearly collided with a man who smelled strongly of whiskey despite the early hour. He mumbled something incomprehensible and staggered past, and Winifred hurried toward the general store, keeping her eyes forward. The store was dim inside, lit only by the morning sun streaming through the front windows. Shelves lined the walls, packed with everything from canned goods to farming equipment. A young man behind the counter looked up as she entered. "Help you, miss. I am looking for books if you have any." He pointed to a small shelf in the corner. "That is all we got. Not much call for reading material out here." Winifred made her way to the shelf, running her fingers over the spines. Mostly dime novels and agricultural guides, but there were a few that looked promising. She had just selected a volume of poetry when the door opened behind her and heavy footsteps entered. "Morning, Hank," the clerk called out. "Your order came in yesterday." "Appreciate it, Tommy. Ranch is running low on just about everything." The voice was deep and rough, but there was something warm in it that made Winifred glance over her shoulder. It was the cowboy she had seen from her window the night before, looking even more imposing up close. He had to be over 6 feet tall, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of whiskey. He wore dusty work clothes and a hat that had seen better days, and when his gaze met hers, she felt an unexpected jolt run through her. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat politely before turning back to the clerk. Winifred told herself she was not disappointed by his brief acknowledgement. She was a wealthy heiress from San Francisco. He was a working cowboy in a nowhere town. Their paths were never meant to cross beyond this brief moment in a general store. She brought her book to the counter, waiting while the cowboy arranged for his order to be loaded onto a wagon. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, the calluses on his hands, the way he moved with the confidence of a man who knew his own strength and purpose. "That will be 30 cents, miss," Tommy said, and Winifred fumbled for her coin purse, irritated with herself for being distracted. As she counted out the coins, a commotion erupted outside. Shouting, then a horse's terrified whinny. The cowboy was out the door before Winifred could even process what was happening, and she followed without thinking, still clutching her book. A horse had broken free from the hitching post and was rearing in panic. Its reins tangled around a young boy who had apparently been trying to pet it. The child was on the ground, frozen in terror as the horse's hooves came down dangerously close to his head. The cowboy moved faster than Winifred would have thought possible for a man his size. He grabbed the boy and rolled, pulling him clear just as the horse's hooves struck the ground where the child's head had been a second before. Then he was on his feet, moving toward the terrified animal with his hands raised, speaking in a low, steady voice. "Easy now, easy. Nobody is going to hurt you. That is it, just settle down." The horse tossed its head, eyes rolling, but the cowboy kept approaching, kept talking in that calm voice. When he was close enough, he reached out slowly and caught the dangling reins. The horse tried to rear again, but he held firm, still talking, still calm, until gradually the animal began to settle. A woman rushed past Winifred, sobbing, and scooped the boy up from where he sat in the dust. "Thomas! Oh my God, Thomas!" The cowboy handed the horse's reins to another man who had emerged from the saloon, then walked over to the woman and child. "He is all right, Mrs. Cooper, just shaken up, but you might want to teach him not to approach strange horses without asking the owner first." "Thank you, Mr. Gallagher." "Thank you so much. I do not know what would have happened if you had not been here." "Just glad I was," he said simply, then caught sight of the boy peeking at him from behind his mother's skirts. He crouched down to the child's level. "You are a brave kid, you know that. But horses are big and they get scared easy, just like people. Next time you want to pet one, you ask first, all right?" The boy nodded, wide-eyed, and the cowboy ruffled his hair before standing and turning back toward the store. His eyes met Winifred's again, and this time he paused. "You all right, madam? You look a bit pale." "I am fine," Winifred said, though her heart was still racing. "That was extraordinarily brave. You saved that child's life." He shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "Just did what anyone would do." "I think you are wrong about that. Most people would have frozen. You moved without hesitation." A faint color rose in his cheeks, barely visible under his tan. "Well, I have been working with horses since I was younger than that boy. You learn to react quick." He touched his hat brim again. "Enjoy your book, madam." He disappeared back into the store, and Winifred stood there in the morning sun, her book clutched to her chest, wondering why her hands were shaking, and why she could still feel the impact of those whiskey-colored eyes meeting hers. Back in her hotel room, she tried to read, but her mind kept wandering to the scene in the street. The cowboy, Gallagher the woman had called him, had moved with such certainty, such calm in the face of danger. She had known plenty of men in San Francisco who called themselves brave, who talked about their exploits and adventures, but she had never seen anyone act with such immediate, selfless courage. Eleanor fussed over her for the rest of the morning, seemingly under the impression that witnessing the incident had traumatized her. Winifred did not bother correcting her. Let Eleanor think she was shaken by the near tragedy, rather than by a pair of unusual eyes and a deep voice that had wrapped around her like warm honey. She spent the afternoon writing letters, one to her father confirming her safe arrival, and one to her friend Catherine back in San Francisco, carefully editing out the more rustic details of Winnemucca that might alarm her. The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon when a knock at her door interrupted her. Mrs. Henderson stood in the hallway, looking apologetic. "Miss Pierce, I am terribly sorry, but a telegram just arrived from your father. He has been delayed. He will not be able to arrive for at least 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks. Winifred's heart sank. "I see. Thank you for letting me know, Mrs. Henderson. If there is anything you need, anything at all, you just let me know. I know Winnemucca is not what you are accustomed to, but it is a good town with good people." After the woman left, Winifred moved to the window again, looking out over the street. 2 more weeks in this place. 2 more weeks of dust and heat and nothing to do. In San Francisco, her days had been filled with social calls, shopping excursions, theater performances, and charity events. Here, She did not even know what women did to pass the time. The next few days passed slowly. Winifred read her book, took careful walks around town with a leaner in tow, and tried not to die of boredom. She wrote more letters, practiced her embroidery, and stared out the window at the harsh desert landscape that surrounded Winnemucca. She saw the cowboy Gallagher once more, riding past the hotel on a beautiful bay horse, but he did not look up and she felt foolish for watching. On her 5th day in town, desperation drove her to ask Mrs. Henderson if there was anything at all that might occupy her time. "Well, Mrs. Henderson said thoughtfully, "there is a church social on Saturday evening. Just a simple gathering, but there will be music and dancing and food. You would be welcome to attend." It was not a society ball, but it was something. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I think I would enjoy that." Saturday evening found Winifred dressing in one of her finer gowns, a deep blue silk that brought out her eyes. Alina helped arrange her dark blonde hair in an elegant style that had been all the rage in San Francisco. When she looked at herself in the small mirror, Winifred knew she looked out of place for a simple church social, but she did not care. She needed to feel like herself again, needed to remember who she was beyond just another person waiting in this dusty town. The church was at the far end of the main street, a simple white building with a small courtyard where lanterns had been strung. Tables were laden with food, and someone was playing a fiddle. People milled about in their Sunday best, which Winifred noted was far simpler than her own attire. She felt suddenly self-conscious, aware of the stares her dress was attracting. Mrs. Henderson swept over immediately, taking Winifred's arm in a motherly fashion. "Come along, dear. Let me introduce you to some of the ladies." The next hour passed in a blur of names and faces. Most of the women were kind, if curious, though a few looked at her expensive dress with something that might have been resentment. Winifred tried to be friendly, to ask questions and show genuine interest, but she could feel the wall between her and these people. They were pleasant to her face, but she was an outsider, a wealthy girl from the city playing at visiting their world. She was standing by the food table, picking at a piece of cake she did not really want, when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Did not expect to see you here, madam." Winifred turned to find Gallagher standing there, cleaned up and wearing clothes that, while simple, were clearly his best. His dark hair was still damp, as though he had just bathed, and he smelled faintly of soap and leather instead of dust and horses. "Mr. Gallagher," she said, pleased that she remembered his name. "I could say the same about you. You do not strike me as the social type." "I am not, usually, but Mrs. Henderson is a good woman and she asked me to come help keep an eye on things. Sometimes the younger men get a little rowdy when they have been drinking." He nodded toward a group of cowboys standing near the edge of the courtyard, passing a flask between them. "That was kind of you," he shrugged. "She let me stay in her boarding house free for 2 months when I first came to Winnemucca and did not have enough money for rent. I owe her more than I could ever repay." There was something in the way he said it, a simple honesty about debts and gratitude that struck Winifred. In her world, people rarely acknowledged what they owed each other. Everything was wrapped up in elaborate social codes and unspoken obligations. "Have you been in Winnemucca long?" she asked, wanting to keep him talking. "About 5 years now. I came out from Missouri looking for work, got hired on at the Gregory Ranch." He paused, then added, "That is where I work. The Gregory Ranch, about 15 miles north of town. We run cattle and horses. It sounds like hard work. It is, but it is good work, honest work." He looked at her dress, and something in his expression shifted. "I am sure it seems pretty rough compared to what you are used to." There was no malice in his words, but Winifred felt them like a slap nonetheless, a reminder of the gulf between them. She was about to respond when a woman appeared at Gallagher's elbow, a pretty brunette with a bright smile. "Hank, I was hoping you would dance with me. They are about to start another song." "Sure, Sarah," he said easily, and let himself be led away without a backward glance at Winifred. She watched him dance with Sarah, then with two other women, laughing and spinning them around the makeshift dance floor with an easy grace that surprised her. Of course, women wanted to dance with him. He was handsome and kind and clearly respected in this community. What did it matter that Winifred Pierce from San Francisco had enjoyed talking to him for 5 minutes? She left the social early, pleading a headache to Mrs. Henderson, and walked back to the hotel alone despite Alina's protests. The night air was cool, a relief after the heat of the day, and the stars overhead were brighter than any she had ever seen in San Francisco. She stood outside the hotel for a long moment, looking up at that vast dark sky, feeling smaller and more lost than she had in years. The next morning, Winifred woke with a sense of determination. She could not spend 2 more weeks feeling sorry for herself. If she was going to be trapped in Winnemucca, she would find something useful to do with her time. After breakfast, she sought out Mrs. Henderson again. "Is there anyone in town who might need help? Any charitable work that needs doing?" Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose. "Well, there is Mrs. Chen down at the end of Church Street. She runs a sort of school for the children whose parents work during the day. She is always saying she could use another pair of hands, but Miss Pierce, I am not sure that is the sort of thing." "It sounds perfect," Winifred interrupted. "Could you give me directions?" An hour later, Winifred found herself in a small house that had been converted into a classroom of sorts. A dozen children ranging from about 4 to 10 years old sat on benches and the floor while a tiny Chinese woman tried to teach them their letters. The chaos was immediate and overwhelming, but Mrs. Chen's face when Winifred offered to help was so grateful that Winifred knew she had made the right decision. "You are certain?" Mrs. Chen asked in careful English. "These children, they are not always well behaved, and the work, it does not pay anything." "I do not need payment," Winifred said firmly. "I need something to do, and I have always enjoyed working with children." It was not entirely true. She had never really worked with children before, but she learned quickly over the next few days. Mrs. Chen's school was a refuge for children whose parents worked in the mines, on the ranches, or in the various businesses that kept Winnemucca running. Some were children of Chinese railroad workers who had settled in the area. Others were the sons and daughters of shopkeepers, washerwomen, and working cowboys. They were loud and energetic and frequently tried her patience, but they were also curious and eager and surprisingly sweet when they wanted to be. Winifred fell into a routine. Mornings at Mrs. Chen's school, helping teach reading and arithmetic. Afternoons spent reading or writing letters or taking walks around town. She grew accustomed to the heat, to the dust, to the rough edges of frontier life. She learned to greet people on the street, to stop and chat with the shop owners, to navigate the unspoken social codes of a small town that were so different from San Francisco society. She did not see Gallagher again for more than a week. Then one morning, she was helping some of the younger children practice their letters in the dirt outside Mrs. Chen's house when she heard hoofbeats and looked up to see him riding past. He was leading a string of horses, probably taking them somewhere to be sold or traded. His eyes met hers and he pulled up his mount. "Madam," he said, touching his hat brim. Then his gaze moved to the children clustered around her and his expression softened. "Hey there, Billy. You staying out of trouble?" One of the boys, a gap-toothed 7-year-old, jumped up with a grin. "Hi, Mr. Hank. Are you taking those horses to Mr. Peterson?" "Sure am. You want to come help me next time I break in some new ones? You are getting big enough." The boy's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? You mean it? Ask your ma if it is all right. If she says yes, you come find me at the Gregory Ranch. Gallagher's eyes returned to Winifred, and there was something different in his gaze. Respect, maybe, or surprise. Did not expect to see you here, Miss Pierce. I am helping Mrs. Chen with the children, Winifred said, trying not to sound defensive. She needed assistance. That is real kind of you. He sounded like he meant it. Mrs. Chen does good work, but she never has enough help. These kids need people who care. One of the horses in his string stamped impatiently, and Gallagher gathered his reins. I better get moving. These animals are not going to deliver themselves. You take care now. He rode off, and Winifred found herself watching until he disappeared around a corner. When she turned back, Mrs. Chen was looking at her with knowing eyes. Hank Gallagher, he is a good man, Mrs. Chen said softly. Best horseman in the county, and kind heart which is more rare than skill. I barely know him, Winifred said quickly. Sometimes that is when we see people most clearly. Before we build up walls and expectations. Mrs. Chen smiled. Come, the children need to practice their numbers now. That evening, Winifred found herself thinking about Mrs. Chen's words, before we build up walls and expectations. Was that what she had done her whole life? Built walls between herself and the world, hidden behind her family's wealth and her own carefully cultivated image of the perfect society girl in San Francisco. She had known exactly who she was supposed to be. The obedient daughter, the accomplished young lady, the suitable bride for someone like Marcus Thornton. But here, in this dusty Nevada town where nobody cared about her father's money or her Paris dresses, she was discovering that she did not really know who she was at all. The days continued to pass. Winifred's father sent another telegram saying he would be delayed further business matters, would explain when he arrived. She should have been frustrated, but instead she felt an odd sense of relief. Every day in Winnemucca, she felt a little less like Winifred Pierce the heiress, and a little more like just Winifred, a woman who taught children their letters and walked the dusty streets and watched the sun set over the desert in shades of purple and gold. She began to make actual friends. Mrs. Chen, of course, who had a quiet wisdom that Winifred found comforting. And Sarah Mitchell, the pretty brunette from the church social, who turned out to be funny and sharp and not at all interested in Hank Gallagher romantically despite their dance. Hank is like a brother to me, Sarah explained when Winifred carefully broached the subject one afternoon. They were sitting in the hotel dining room sharing tea, a luxury Sarah clearly appreciated. We grew up in the same town back in Missouri. His family had the farm next to ours. When he came out west and found work, he sent word back that there were opportunities here, and that is how my family ended up in Winnemucca too. Have you known him long then, since we were children? He is one of the best people I know, honestly. Had a hard life, though. His parents died when he was 16. Fever took them both within a week of each other. Hank had to sell the farm to pay their debts, which is when he decided to head west. He sent money back to my family for months to repay a loan his father had from mine, even though Papa told him not to worry about it. That is just how Hank is. He does what is right, no matter what it costs him. Winifred absorbed this information, adding it to the growing picture she had of Hank Gallagher. Orphaned young, worked hard, repaid his debts, kind to children and animals. It was a portrait of decency that stood in sharp contrast to many of the men she had known in San Francisco, men who had never wanted for anything and took their advantages as natural rights rather than privileges. She saw him around town occasionally. He always tipped his hat, sometimes stopped to talk for a few minutes if he was not in a hurry. She learned he was the head wrangler at the Gregory Ranch, responsible for all the horses. She learned he was 26 years old, that he liked his coffee black and his whiskey neat on the rare occasions he drank. She learned he could make children laugh and horses obey with equal ease. What she did not learn was whether he ever thought about her the way she was beginning to think about him, whether he noticed how she seemed to always be watching when he rode past, whether her presence registered as anything more than that of a visiting city girl who would leave as soon as her father collected her. 3 weeks after her arrival in Winnemucca, everything changed. It was a Thursday afternoon, hot even for July. Winifred was at Mrs. Chen's school, reading to the younger children while the older ones worked on arithmetic problems. She heard raised voices outside and looked up to see several men on horseback riding hard down the main street, shouting something she could not make out. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her face tight with concern. "Fire," she said. "There is a fire at one of the ranches, the Gregory Ranch." Winifred's heart stopped. She was on her feet before she realized she had moved. "How bad?" "I do not know. The men said they need everyone who can help." Mrs. Chen looked at the children. "We must keep them here, keep them safe and calm." But Winifred was not thinking about staying safe. She was thinking about Hank, about horses trapped in burning barns, about how much could be lost in a fire out here where help was scarce and water scarcer. "I have to go," she said. "Miss Pierce, that is not a good idea. You do not know anything about fighting fires." "Then I will learn." Winifred was already moving toward the door. "Can you manage the children alone?" Mrs. Chen nodded reluctantly. "Be careful. Fire is dangerous, and you do not have experience with such things." Winifred ran back to the hotel, changed into her simplest dress, and asked Mrs. Henderson where she could find a wagon or horse to rent. The woman tried to talk her out of going, but Winifred was insistent. Finally, Mrs. Henderson directed her to the livery stable, where a kind older man, after extracting promises that she knew how to handle a horse, saddled up a gentle mare. The ride to the Gregory Ranch took nearly an hour, following the directions the livery owner had given her. She could see the smoke long before she reached the ranch, a dark column rising into the pale sky. Her hands tightened on the reins and she urged the mare faster. The scene that greeted her was chaos. The main barn was engulfed in flames, and men were running in every direction, some leading terrified horses away from the fire, others forming a bucket brigade from the well to throw water on the flames. The heat was incredible, even from a distance, and the air was thick with smoke that made her eyes water. Winifred tied the mare far from the fire and ran toward the organized chaos. A woman caught her arm, someone she did not recognize, face streaked with soot. "You should not be here. Get back." "I can help. Tell me what to do." The woman looked at her for a moment, then pointed. "The house. Women are organizing supplies, water and wet cloths for the men. Go help them." Winifred ran to the ranch house where indeed several women were working frantically, preparing buckets of water, tearing cloth into strips, setting out food and coffee for the exhausted firefighters. She threw herself into the work, doing whatever was needed without question. It was nearly sunset before the fire was finally under control. The barn nothing but smoking ruins, but the spread to other buildings prevented. Men staggered away from the wreckage, faces black with soot, coughing and exhausted. Winifred helped distribute water and wet cloths, her fine dress ruined beyond repair, her hair falling loose from its pins, but she did not care. She was bandaging a burn on a young ranch hand's arm when she heard someone say Hank's name. Her head snapped up. "Where is he? Is he hurt?" "He is all right, miss. Tired as hell, pardon my language, but all right. Saved near about half the horses single-handed, kept running back into that barn even when we thought the roof was going to come down. I thought for sure we were going to lose him." Winifred's hands were shaking as she finished the bandage. She had to find him, had to see with her own eyes that he was safe. She found him behind the wreckage of the barn, checking over a group of horses that had been led to a temporary corral. He was covered in soot, his shirt torn, and she could see angry red burns on his forearms. But he was standing, was moving, was alive. "Hank," she called, and he turned, his eyes widening when he saw her. "Winifred, what in God's name are you doing here?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and something about that, combined with the relief of seeing him safe, made her eyes sting with tears. "I heard about the fire. I wanted to help." He walked toward her, shaking his head in disbelief. "You rode out here alone. That was foolish. This is dangerous work. I am not some fragile flower, Hank Gallagher. I can help when help is needed." He stared at her for a long moment, taking in her ruined dress, her loose hair, the soot on her face. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. It was tired and sad, but genuine. "No," he said quietly. "I suppose you are not fragile at all, are you?" Someone called his name, needing him to look at an injured horse, and he turned away. But before he did, his hand briefly touched her shoulder, a gesture so quick she almost missed it. The warmth of that touch stayed with her long after he had gone. The aftermath of the fire kept everyone busy for hours. The ranch owner, Mr. Gregory, a stern man in his 50s, thanked everyone who had helped and offered what hospitality he could manage given the circumstances. Several of the women from town had prepared food, and everyone gathered to eat and rest while Mr. Gregory tallied up the losses. Winifred found herself sitting on the porch of the ranch house, too tired to move, watching as the last light faded from the sky. The stars were emerging, thousands of them, and the air smelled of smoke and ash. Hank climbed the porch steps and lowered himself to sit beside her with a groan. "You should head back to town before it gets full dark. I can have one of the hands ride with you. What about you?" "I am staying here tonight. Too much to do, and some of the horses are still spooked. They need familiar voices. You are injured. You should have those burns looked at properly." He glanced at his forearms and shrugged. "I have had worse." "That is not the point." Before she could think better of it, Winifred reached out and gently took his arm, examining the burns in the light spilling from the house windows. They were not terrible, but they needed cleaning and bandaging. "Wait here." She went into the house and returned with water, clean cloth, and the jar of salve one of the women had been using earlier. Hank started to protest, but she fixed him with a look that stopped the words in his throat. "Sit still and let me help you." She cleaned the burns as gently as she could, though she saw him wince. His arms were strong and muscled from years of physical labor, so different from the soft hands of the men she knew in San Francisco. There was something intimate about tending to him like this, about the way he trusted her enough to sit still and let her work. "You were very brave today," she said softly as she wrapped the bandages. "Everyone is saying you saved most of the horses. I just did what needed doing. Those animals depend on us to keep them safe. Still, you risked your life." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My pa always told me that a man's worth is not measured by what he owns, but by what he is willing to sacrifice for others. That is probably why he died poor, but he died with his honor intact. I always figured that was worth more than money." Winifred finished tying off the bandage and sat back. "My father would say your pa was a fool. That money is how you measure success, how you build security for yourself and your family. What would you say?" It was a simple question, but it felt weighted, important. Winifred thought about her life in San Francisco, about all the things her father's money had bought her. Education, fine clothes, social position, comfort. All of it undeniably valuable. But sitting here in the dark with this man who had nearly died saving horses, whose hands were rough with work and whose arms she had just bandaged, she found herself questioning everything she had always believed. "I think," she said slowly, "that there are different kinds of wealth, and maybe the kind that can be counted in dollars is not the most important after all." Hank looked at her, really looked at her, and she felt something pass between them in the darkness. An understanding, a connection, a recognition of something neither of them had words for yet. "You should get back to town," he said finally, his voice rough. "It is not safe riding in the dark. Will you be all right here? I will be fine. This is my world, Winifred. I know how to handle it." She wanted to protest, wanted to stay, but she knew he was right. So she let one of the ranch hands escort her back to Winnemucca, riding through the dark with the stars overhead and her mind full of whiskey-colored eyes and work-roughened hands. The next day, Mrs. Henderson reported that the fire had started from a lightning strike during a brief storm that had blown through. No one had been killed, which was a miracle, but the losses were substantial. The Gregory Ranch would need months to rebuild. Winifred spent the morning at Mrs. Chen's school, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about Hank, wondering if he had slept, if his burns were bothering him, if he was all right. It was ridiculous how much she cared, how worried she was about a man she barely knew, except she did know him, she realized. Maybe not the details of his life, but the essence of who he was. And that essence called to something deep inside her, something she had not even known existed until she came to this dusty Nevada town. 3 days after the fire, Hank came into town for supplies. Winifred saw him from the window of Mrs. Chen's school and made a quick excuse to step outside. He was just coming out of the general store when she caught up with him. "Hank, how are your arms? Are the burns healing properly?" He looked surprised to see her, but pleased. "They are fine." "You did good work bandaging them. Thank you for that. I am glad I could help. How are things at the ranch?" "Busy. We are making plans to rebuild, but it is going to take time and money." He shifted the package he was carrying. "Mr. Gregory is worried. Insurance will not cover everything, and we lost a lot of equipment along with the barn." An idea struck Winifred, sudden and clear. "What if you had help? Financial help?" Hank's expression closed off immediately. "We will manage. Mr. Gregory is a proud man, and so am I. We do not need charity." "It would not be charity. It would be an investment. My father is wealthy, and he is always looking for good investments. A working ranch, one with skilled people running it, that could be very profitable." "Winifred, no. I appreciate the thought, but no." "Why not?" "Pride is not going to rebuild that barn or replace the equipment you lost. And my father would expect a return on his investment. It would be a business arrangement. Your father does not even know me. Why would he invest in a ranch run by a cowboy he has never met? Because I would recommend it. And because it is the right thing to do." Hank shook his head, but she could see she had given him something to think about. "I need to get these supplies back to the ranch, but Winifred, I mean it. We will find a way without taking money from you or your father. Just think about it, please." He mounted his horse and looked down at her. "You are stubborn, you know that. I have been told that before." He rode away, and Winifred stood in the street watching him go, her mind already working on how to approach her father with the idea when he finally arrived. But she did not have to wait long. That very evening, a telegram arrived from her father announcing he would be in Winnemucca the next day. Winifred felt a complicated mix of relief and apprehension. She had been here nearly a month, and in that time, she had changed in ways she was not sure her father would understand or appreciate. William Pierce arrived in a private coach that made every head in Winnemucca turn. He was a tall man in his 50s, impeccably dressed, with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. He embraced Winifred warmly, but she could see the surprise in his eyes as he took in her appearance. "Daughter, you look different. The sun has given you color. I've been spending time outdoors. Teaching at a local school, actually. His eyebrows rose. Teaching? Whatever for? Over dinner in the hotel dining room, Winifred told him about her time in Winnemucca, carefully editing out anything that might alarm him. She talked about Mrs. Chen's school, about the people she had met, about how different life was here compared to San Francisco. She did not mention Hank Gallagher, though his name sat on the tip of her tongue the entire evening. Finally, as they were finishing their meal, she brought up the fire and the Gregory Ranch. "It is a successful operation," she said, trying to sound businesslike. "They run cattle and horses, and from what I understand, they turn a good profit most years. But the fire was devastating. With proper investment, they could rebuild and expand. It could be very lucrative, father." William Pierce studied his daughter with shrewd eyes. "You have taken quite an interest in local business for someone who is only visiting." "I have taken an interest in helping good people who deserve a chance. Is that not something you always taught me to do?" "When it makes good business sense, yes. Tell me more about this ranch." They talked for another hour, and by the end, William Pierce had agreed to at least visit the Gregory Ranch and assess the situation. Winifred tried not to let her relief show too obviously. The next day, they rode out to the ranch in her father's coach. Mr. Gregory met them with wary courtesy, clearly uncomfortable with the arrival of a wealthy investor. But William Pierce was at his most charming, asking intelligent questions about the operation, the land, the markets for cattle and horses. Winifred watched her father work, saw how he put Mr. Gregory at ease while still maintaining control of the conversation. Hank was there too, introduced as the head wrangler. He shook William Pierce's hand firmly and answered questions about the horses with quiet confidence. Winifred saw her father assessing him, that calculating look he got when evaluating people. After touring what remained of the ranch, William Pierce made an offer. He would provide the funds to rebuild the barn and replace the lost equipment in exchange for a 20% stake in the ranch. It was a generous offer, far better than Winifred had dared hope for. Mr. Gregory looked stunned. "Mr. Pierce, I do not know what to say. That is extraordinarily fair. My daughter seems to think you run a good operation here, and I have learned to trust her judgment." William Pierce glanced at Winifred with a small smile. "Besides, I believe in investing in people who work hard and know what they are doing. You strike me as that kind of man, Mr. Gregory." Papers were drawn up, agreements made, and just like that, the Gregory Ranch had a path forward. As they prepared to leave, Hank approached the coach where Winifred was waiting. "Thank you," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I know this was your doing. My father makes his own business decisions. Maybe, but I am not a fool, Winifred. You pushed for this." His eyes held hers. "Why?" "Because I care about you," she wanted to say. "Because seeing you hurt and worried kept me awake at night. Because in the short time I have known you, you have become more important to me than people I have known my whole life." But she could not say any of that, not with her father waiting in the coach and the ranch hands watching. So instead she said, "Because it was the right thing to do, because good people deserve good things." Is that the only reason? Her heart was pounding. What other reason would there be? He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing his words, deciding whether to speak or stay silent. Finally he said, "Will you be leaving Winnemucca soon? Now that your father is here?" "I suppose so. There is no reason for me to stay." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment maybe, but he hid it quickly. "Then I hope you have a safe journey back to San Francisco, and I hope you remember sometimes that there are good things to be found in places you do not expect." He stepped back, touched his hat brim, and walked away. Winifred climbed into the coach feeling like she had just lost something precious, something she had not even realized she wanted until it was slipping away. That evening, William Pierce sat with his daughter in her hotel room and regarded her with serious eyes. "Tell me about the cowboy," he said. Winifred felt her face heat. "What cowboy? Do not play coy with me, Winifred. I saw how he looked at you, and how you looked at him. That man is in love with you, and unless I miss my guess, you have feelings for him as well." There was no point in denying it. Her father had not built his fortune by being blind to human nature. "His name is Hank Gallagher. He works at the Gregory Ranch." "I gathered that. What I want to know is what you intend to do about it." "Do about it? Father, there is nothing to do. He is a working cowboy. I am your daughter. Our worlds could not be more different." "Your mother was a seamstress when I met her," William Pierce said quietly. "Did you know that?" Winifred stared at him. "What? No. Mother was from a good family. You always said so." "I said she was a good woman, which was true. But her family had lost everything in a bad investment before I met her. She was working as a seamstress to support her younger siblings. Everyone told me I was a fool to marry her, that I should find someone from my own social class. I did not care. I loved her, and she made me a better man." His eyes were distant with memory. "Every success I have had, every good thing in my life can be traced back to marrying your mother. She taught me that there are different kinds of wealth, and that love is the rarest and most valuable kind." Winifred felt tears prick her eyes. Her father never talked about her mother, not like this. "I did not know. Because I have been a fool these past years since she died. I threw myself into business, into making money, because it was easier than facing the grief. And I tried to shape you into what I thought you should be, some perfect society lady who would make a good marriage to someone like Marcus Thornton." He took her hand. "But your mother would not have wanted that for you. She would have wanted you to be happy. To find someone who makes you feel alive. Hank does not even know how I feel, and I am not sure he would want me if he did. I am everything he is not. Wealthy, sheltered, used to a life of comfort. What could I possibly offer him? Why do you not ask him that yourself?" The next morning, Winifred woke early and dressed carefully. Not in one of her fine dresses, but in the simple cotton day dress she had worn to Mrs. Chen's school. She braided her hair simply and went down to find her father already at breakfast. "I am going to the Gregory Ranch," she announced. "I need to talk to Hank." Her father smiled. "Take the coach and take your time. I have business to attend to in town, so there is no rush." The ride to the ranch seemed to take forever. Winifred rehearsed what she would say, rejected it, tried again. "How did you tell a man that you loved him when you had only known him a few weeks? How did you convince someone that you were willing to give up everything you had known for a life you had never imagined?" The ranch was busy when she arrived, men working on clearing the site for the new barn. She asked for Hank and was directed to one of the corrals where he was working with a young horse, teaching it to accept a saddle. He looked up when she approached, surprise crossing his face. "Winifred, is everything all right? Is your father?" "My father is fine. I came because I needed to talk to you." She took a breath, gathering her courage. Privately, if possible, he secured the young horse and climbed over the corral fence. "All right, we can walk to the creek. It is quiet there." They walked in silence for a few minutes, heading away from the ranch buildings toward a line of cottonwood trees that marked a small creek. The morning was already warm, the sun beating down from a cloudless sky. Winifred's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. When they reached the shade of the trees, Hank turned to face her. "What did you want to talk about?" "You," she said, the word coming out more forcefully than she intended. "I wanted to talk about you, about us, if there is an us." He went very still. "Winifred, let me finish, please." She twisted her hands together. "I have been thinking about what you said yesterday, about finding good things in unexpected places, And the truth is, I did find something good here. Something I was not looking for and did not expect. I found you. You are leaving in a few days. Going back to your life in San Francisco. What if I did not want to go back? What if I wanted to stay here? He stared at her like she had spoken in a foreign language. You cannot be serious. Winifred, you are rich. You live in a mansion. You wear dresses that cost more than I make in a year. Why would you give that up for a life out here in the dust and heat? Because money cannot buy what you have given me. The words came from somewhere deep inside her, a truth she had not fully articulated until this moment. It cannot buy the way I feel when I see you. It cannot buy the sense of purpose I found teaching those children. It cannot buy the feeling of being valued for who I am rather than what I am worth. All my life, I have had everything money can buy, but I have never had this. I have never had you. Hank closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were bright with emotion. Do you have any idea what you are saying? Life as a cowboy's wife, it is not easy. It is hard work and long hours, and there are never any guarantees. I cannot give you the things you are used to. I do not want those things. I want a life that means something. I want to wake up next to someone I love and go to sleep knowing I made a difference in the world, even if it is a small one. I want you, Hank, if you will have me. He reached out and cupped her face in his calloused hands. If I will have you. Winifred, I have been half in love with you since you walked into that general store looking like you had stepped out of a painting. And I have been fighting it every day since because I knew there was no future in it. You are so far above me. I am not above you. I am standing right here, asking you to love me. Can you do that? His answer was to kiss her, soft and sweet at first, then deeper as she wound her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the feeling she had been holding inside. He tasted like coffee and sunshine, and his hands in her hair were gentle despite their roughness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said, the words rough but true. I love your stubbornness and your kindness and the way you are not afraid to get your hands dirty. I love that you came all the way out here just to talk to me. But Winifred, are you sure? Once you make this choice, your life will never be the same. I am counting on that, she said, smiling through tears she had not realized were falling. My life before was comfortable, but it was not real. This is real. You are real. And I would rather have 1 year of real life with you than 100 years of comfort without you. He kissed her again, and this time it felt like a promise, a beginning, a future unfolding. When they finally walked back to the ranch hand in hand, Winifred felt lighter than she had in years. She had found what she had been looking for without knowing she was looking. She had found home. Her father took the news better than she expected. He sat in the hotel dining room, listening as Winifred explained her decision to stay in Winnemucca, to marry Hank, to build a life in Nevada. I thought you might say that, William Pierce said when she finished. I saw it in your face yesterday. You look like your mother did when she told her family she was going to marry me, determined and scared and absolutely sure at the same time. Are you angry? Angry? No, worried. Perhaps a little, but mostly proud. You are choosing your own path, and that takes courage. He paused. I will settle a sum on you, of course, enough to ensure you have security, no matter what happens. Father, I do not need. It is not about need. It is about knowing that my daughter will never be in want. Hank Gallagher strikes me as a good man, but life is uncertain. I want you to have something that is yours alone always. He smiled. Besides, consider it your inheritance. You might as well have it now when you can actually use it. Winifred rose and hugged her father. Thank you for understanding, for letting me go. I am not letting you go. I am letting you fly. There is a difference. The next weeks passed in a blur of planning. There was no point in waiting, they decided. Why delay when they had already found what they were looking for? The wedding would be simple, held at the church in Winnemucca with the whole town invited. Winifred wrote to her friends in San Francisco, explaining her decision. She wrote to Marcus Thornton, politely but firmly ending any understanding he might have thought existed between them. She donated most of her fine dresses to a church charity, keeping only a few simpler pieces that might be suitable for her new life. Eleanor, her maid, chose to return to San Francisco rather than stay in Nevada, and Winifred could not blame her. This life was not for everyone. Sarah Mitchell helped her shop for things she would actually need. Practical dresses, sturdy boots, hats to protect against the sun. They laughed together at Winifred's complete ignorance of basic ranch life, and Sarah promised to teach her everything from cooking on a wood stove to preserving vegetables for winter. Mrs. Chen cried when Winifred told her about the wedding. Happy tears, she insisted, and made her promise to keep helping at the school whenever she could. The children love you, and you are good at this. Do not give it up just because you are married, Winifred promised. She was beginning to understand that her new life did not mean giving up the things she had discovered about herself. It meant expanding them, building on them, becoming more fully who she was meant to be. Hank was busy at the ranch, working long hours to rebuild and prepare for winter. But he rode into town every few days to see her, and those moments together were precious. They walked the streets of Winnemucca hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. They sat in the courtyard behind the church and made plans for their future. He told her about the small house on Gregory land where they would live, just 2 rooms but sturdy and comfortable. She told him about her hopes to maybe start a proper school someday, something more than what Mrs. Chen could offer with her limited resources. You could do it, Hank said. With your father's help, maybe. A real school building, proper supplies. This town needs that. Our children will need it someday, Winifred said, then blushed at her own boldness. Hank's hand tightened on hers. Our children, I like the sound of that. The wedding took place on a Saturday in early September, when the worst of the summer heat had passed. The church was packed with people from town and from the ranch. Winifred wore a simple white dress that Sarah had helped her sew, far plainer than what she would have worn in San Francisco, but perfect for this moment, this place, this man. Her father walked her down the aisle, and she saw him blinking back tears as he placed her hand in Hank's. Hank wore a new suit, the nicest thing she had ever seen him in, and his eyes when he looked at her were filled with such love that she felt her breath catch. The minister spoke about commitment and sacrifice, and the bonds of matrimony. Hank repeated his vows in a strong, clear voice, promising to love and honor her for all his days. When it was Winifred's turn, she spoke the words from her heart. I promise to love you, to stand beside you, to build a life with you that is true and good and honest. I promise to be your partner in all things, through hardship and joy, through every season of our lives together. And I promise to never forget that the greatest wealth is not in what we have, but in what we give to each other. Hank's eyes were bright when he slipped the simple gold ring onto her finger. She did the same for him, and then the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Hank kissed her to the applause and cheers of everyone present. The celebration afterward was boisterous and warm. People brought food, the fiddler from the church social played, and there was dancing in the church courtyard under the stars. Winifred danced with her father, with Mr. Gregory, with 6 ranch hands. But mostly she danced with Hank, held safe in his arms while the music played and their friends celebrated around them. Late in the evening, William Pierce sought out his new son-in-law. Winifred watched from across the courtyard as her father and her husband spoke, serious conversation she could not hear. But she saw Hank shake her father's hand, saw the mutual respect in how they stood together. Two men from different worlds, brought together by love for the same woman. When the celebration finally wound down, Hank lifted Winifred onto his horse and swung up behind her. They rode together through the dark toward the ranch, toward their new home, toward their future. Winifred leaned back against her husband's chest and looked up at the stars. "Are you all right?" Hank asked softly, his arms secure around her waist. "I am perfect. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. No regrets, no second thoughts about giving up your old life." She twisted in the saddle to look at him. "Not for 1 second. Hank, you gave me something no amount of money could ever buy. You gave me the chance to discover who I really am. You gave me a life that matters. You gave me love that is real and true. How could I ever regret that?" He kissed her, tender and sweet, and they continued riding through the night. The little house on the ranch was indeed small. Just a front room with a fireplace and cook stove, and a bedroom behind. But it was clean and sturdy, and someone, probably Sarah, had left wildflowers in a jar on the rough table. Hank carried Winifred over the threshold, making her laugh and set her down gently. "Welcome home, Mrs. Gallagher." "I love the sound of that," she said, and kissed him. Their wedding night was sweet and tender, a discovery of each other without the barriers that had stood between them. Hank was gentle, patient with her inexperience, and when Winifred woke the next morning wrapped in his arms, she felt a completeness she had never known before. Life as a ranch wife was indeed harder than anything Winifred had known. She learned to cook on the temperamental wood stove, burning more meals than she successfully prepared in those first weeks. She learned to mend clothes and tend a vegetable garden and preserve food for winter. Her hands, once soft and carefully tended, grew rough with work. She learned to ride properly, not the sedate side-saddle trotting she had done in San Francisco, but real riding that let her keep up with Hank when he worked with the horses. Sarah was her constant friend and teacher, patient with Winifred's mistakes and generous with her knowledge. The two women spent long afternoons together, working and talking, and Winifred found a depth of friendship she had never experienced with the society girls back home. She continued helping at Mrs. Chen's school twice a week, and those days were highlights. The children loved Mrs. Hank, as they called her, and she loved them back. She taught them reading and writing and arithmetic, but also about the wider world, about places she had been and things she had seen. She wanted them to know that life held possibilities beyond Winnemucca. Even as she had chosen to make Winnemucca her home, her father returned to San Francisco but wrote regularly. His letters were full of business news and gossip from society, but also genuine interest in her life. He sent books, supplies for the school, little luxuries that made her smile. And he visited every few months, staying at the hotel in town and riding out to the ranch for dinner. Winifred treasured those visits, the way her father and Hank had grown to genuinely like and respect each other. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, learning to live with another person, to compromise and communicate and build a partnership. There were disagreements, of course, moments of frustration when Winifred's upbringing clashed with the realities of ranch life, or when Hank's natural independence chafed against sharing decisions. But they worked through every conflict with honesty and love, learning each other's rhythms and needs. Winifred discovered that she loved the physical work of ranch life, the way her body grew strong and capable. She loved being outside, loved the vast Nevada sky and the way the desert bloomed after rain. She loved the tight-knit community of Winnemucca, how people looked out for each other and came together in times of need. Most of all, she loved waking up every morning next to Hank, loved the life they were building together. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Winifred realized she was pregnant. She told Hank one evening after dinner, nervous despite herself. His face lit up with joy so pure it made her want to cry. "A baby. We are going to have a baby in the fall, I think. Are you happy?" He pulled her into his arms. "Happy, Winifred, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and so grateful I can barely speak." The pregnancy was not easy. The summer heat was brutal, and Winifred's body rebelled in ways that left her exhausted and sick for weeks. But Sarah and Mrs. Chen fussed over her, and Hank was endlessly patient, taking over the household tasks she could not manage and holding her when she cried from frustration. William Pierce arrived 2 weeks before the baby was due, insisting he wanted to be present for the birth of his first grandchild. Hank gave up their bedroom for his father-in-law and moved a cot into the front room, though William protested. "I should be at the hotel, not displacing you from your own bed." "You are family," Hank said simply. "Family stays together." The baby came on a cool October evening, after 16 hours of labor that left Winifred convinced she was going to die. But the midwife Sarah had brought was skilled and patient, and when the baby finally arrived, crying lustily, Winifred forgot all the pain. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant on Winifred's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Winifred looked down at her son, at his red face and dark hair and tiny perfect hands, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known possible. Hank was beside her, his face full of wonder as he gently touched the baby's head. "We have a son," he whispered. "Winifred, we have a son." "What should we name him?" she asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now Hank looked at his wife and child, then at William Pierce standing in the doorway with tears streaming down his face. "William," Hank said, "if it is all right with you. William Henry Gallagher, after both our fathers." William Pierce came into the room, his usual composure shattered by emotion. "You would do that. You would name him for me. You are his grandfather. And you gave me your blessing to marry your daughter when you could have fought it. That means more than I can say." Winifred watched her father hold his grandson for the first time and felt the last pieces of her old and new lives knit together. This was her family now, old and new, past and future, all woven together in this tiny house on a Nevada ranch. Baby William was a good child, healthy and happy. He grew strong on his mother's milk and his father's love. Hank was a devoted father, coming home from long days working with the horses to hold his son and sing to him in a soft voice that made Winifred fall in love with him all over again. She returned to helping at Mrs. Chen's school when William was 3 months old, bringing him with her. The children were delighted by the baby, and Mrs. Chen was happy to watch him when Winifred was teaching. The ranch prospered under the partnership between Mr. Gregory and William Pierce. The new barn was completed, bigger and better than the old one. They expanded the horse breeding operation, and Hank's reputation as a horseman grew. People came from all over Nevada to buy Gregory Ranch horses, and Hank's name was often the selling point. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family, seasons turning from hot summers to cold winters and back again. Winifred's garden flourished, and she learned to can and preserve enough food to see them through the lean times. She started a small lending library out of their house, sharing her books with anyone who wanted to borrow them. She taught other women to read, holding informal classes in the evenings when the work was done. When William was 2, Winifred found herself pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and while the pregnancy was still difficult, she felt more confident. Their daughter was born on a spring morning when the desert was blooming, a tiny perfect girl with Hank's whiskey-colored eyes. They named her Catherine Aliner, after Winifred's mother and her old maid who had since married and settled in San Francisco. Little Catherine was quieter than William had been, more contemplative, but no less loved. Watching Hank with their children, seeing the patience and gentleness he showed them, Winifred often marveled at the path that had brought her here. If someone had told her 5 years ago that she would be a ranch wife in Nevada, teaching school and raising children in a 2-room house, she would have laughed at the absurdity. But this life, this unexpected, unlikely life, was more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined. One evening, when William was 4 and Catherine nearly 2, Winifred stood in the doorway of their house watching the sun set. Hank came up behind her, slipping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how strange life is. How the things we think we want are not always what we need. How sometimes the best gifts come from the most unexpected places. Any regrets?" It was a question he still asked sometimes, as if he could not quite believe she had chosen this life, chosen him. She turned in his arms and looked up at his face, lined now with years of working in the sun, but still the face that had made her heart skip that first day in the general store. "Not a single one. You gave me everything that matters, Hank. You gave me purpose and love and a family. You gave me a life that is real and true. Money cannot buy what you have given me. It never could." He kissed her, slow and sweet, and in the distance she could hear William playing and Catherine laughing and the horses moving in their corral. This was her wealth now, she thought. Not in dollars or mansions or fine dresses, but in moments like this. In love and family and a life well lived. "I love you," Hank said against her hair. "Every day I wake up grateful that you walked into that general store, that you saw something in me worth staying for. I love you too. And I did not stay for you, not entirely. I stayed for me, for the woman I could become here. You just happened to be the best part of the bargain." He laughed, that deep, warm sound she loved, and pulled her closer. They stood there as the sun finished setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. 2 people from different worlds who had found their home in each other. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their growing children. William grew into a serious boy who loved horses as much as his father, following Hank around the ranch and absorbing everything he could learn. Catherine was quieter but equally passionate, her interests leaning toward books and learning. She reminded Winifred of herself at that age, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. When William was 7 and Catherine 5, tragedy struck the Gregory ranch. Mr. Gregory, who had never fully recovered from the strain of the fire and its aftermath, suffered a heart attack and died in his sleep. His wife had passed years before, and they had no children. To everyone's surprise, his will left the ranch to be divided equally between his nephew, who lived back east, and Hank Gallagher. The nephew wanted nothing to do with a Nevada ranch and offered to sell his half to Hank. It was Winifred Pierce who provided the funds, insisting it was an investment in his grandchildren's future. So at 33, Hank found himself half owner of the Gregory ranch, with responsibilities he had never imagined. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Hank threw himself into the work, determined to honor Mr. Gregory's faith in him. Winifred stood beside him through every decision, every challenge, every triumph. They expanded the horse breeding operation further, began breeding cattle more selectively, invested in better equipment and facilities. The ranch prospered under Hank's leadership. His reputation for integrity and skill grew beyond Nevada. Buyers came from as far as California and Colorado to purchase Gregory Ranch stock. The small operation became one of the most respected ranches in the region, but success brought its own challenges. More responsibility meant longer hours, more stress. There were times when Hank was gone for days, traveling to horse shows or to negotiate deals. Winifred found herself managing things at home alone, a role she had grown into but which sometimes felt overwhelming. They made it work because they had learned to communicate, to support each other, to remember what mattered most. On hard days, Hank would find time to ride home just to have dinner with his family. On stressful nights, Winifred would wait up to listen to his worries and offer counsel. They were partners in every sense of the word. Their marriage strengthened rather than strained by the challenges they faced. Mrs. Chen passed away when Catherine was 8, a loss that hit Winifred hard. The old woman had been a mentor and friend, someone who had seen value in a wealthy girl trying to find her way. In her will, Mrs. Chen left her small house to Winifred with a note that said simply, "For the school, make it real," and Winifred did. She converted Mrs. Chen's house into a proper schoolhouse, using money her father provided and her own considerable organizational skills. She hired a teacher from back east, a young woman fresh from normal school who was eager for adventure. Together they created something Winnemucca had never had before. A real school with proper books and supplies, and a curriculum that prepared children for whatever future they might choose. Winifred continued to teach part-time, specializing in the older students who were preparing for further education. She loved seeing their minds expand, loved watching children from working families discover that they too could aspire to more than what they had known. Several of her students went on to colleges back east, something that would have been impossible without the education she provided. Her father, watching all this from San Francisco, told her once during a visit, "You have done more good with that school than I have done with all my business deals." You are changing lives, Winifred, real lives in real ways. I learned from you, Father. You always said that wealth is only valuable if you use it to make the world better. I said that, did I? I must have been having a philosophical moment, he smiled. But you have taken it further than I ever did. You make me proud, daughter. When William was 12 and Catherine 10, Winifred found herself pregnant again, a surprise that left her and Hank both shocked and delighted. She was 35 now, older than was typical for pregnancy, and the whole town seemed to worry over her. But the pregnancy progressed smoothly, and on a cold November night, she delivered twin boys, healthy and loud and absolutely identical. They named them Thomas and James, and their arrival brought new chaos and joy to the Gallagher household. William and Catherine doted on their little brothers, and Hank walked around in a daze for weeks, unable to quite believe his family had doubled in size so suddenly. Life with 4 children was different from life with 2. Louder, messier, more complicated, but also fuller, richer, more vibrant. The little house they had started in had been expanded twice now, growing with their family until it was a comfortable home with enough room for everyone. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. William, true to form, wanted nothing more than to run the ranch someday. He worked alongside Hank from the time he was old enough to be useful, learning every aspect of the operation. Catherine surprised everyone by announcing at 15 that she wanted to be a doctor. It was an unusual ambition for a girl, but Winifred and Hank supported her completely, knowing that the world was changing and that their daughter had the intelligence and determination to achieve anything she set her mind to. The twins were still too young to know what they wanted, but they kept everyone on their toes with their energy and mischief. They were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into trouble together with cheerful regularity. Winifred's father continued to visit several times a year, his grandchildren the light of his life. He had never remarried after Winifred's mother died, finding purpose instead in his business and his family. He funded Catherine's education, arranged for her to attend a women's medical college back east when the time came. He set up trust funds for all the children, ensuring they would have opportunities and security. One evening, when William Pierce was visiting and the family was gathered after dinner, he looked around at his grandchildren and daughter and son-in-law and said, "This is what success looks like, not the money I have made or the business I have built. This. Family. Love. People who care for each other and work together and build something lasting. You have taught me that, Winifred, you and Hank both." Hank reached across the table and took Winifred's hand. "We have been blessed, sir, more than we deserve." "No," William Pierce said firmly. "You have worked for everything you have. You have built this life with your own hands and hearts. That is not luck. That is character." As the years passed, Winifred watched her children become adults. William took over more and more of the ranch management, proving himself as capable as his father. Catherine left for medical school at 18, writing long letters home about her studies and the exciting new world she was discovering. The twins grew into young men, Thomas deciding to study law and James wanting to be a teacher. Winifred herself became something of a fixture in Winnemucca, known and respected throughout the region. The school she had founded thrived, educating hundreds of children over the years. She served on town committees, organized charity drives, helped families in need. But she always came home to the ranch, to Hank, to the life they had built together. She and Hank grew older together, their hair going gray, their bodies bearing the marks of years of hard work. But their love, if anything, grew deeper and stronger. They still talked for hours, still made each other laugh, still reached for each other in the night. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Hank took Winifred riding to the place by the creek where he had first told her he loved her. They sat under the cottonwood trees, older now but still standing strong, and looked back at the years they had shared. "You remember what you said to me here?" Hank asked. "About money not being able to buy what I had given you." "I remember. I meant every word. I have been thinking about that lately, about how we measure wealth, what really matters in life." He took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles, over the calluses and the simple gold ring she still wore. "You gave up so much to be with me. A life of comfort and ease, all the advantages your father's money could provide. I gave up nothing that mattered. You say that now, after 20 years, but sometimes I wonder if you ever regret it, if you ever wish you had chosen differently." Winifred turned to face him fully, cupping his weathered face in her work-roughened hands. "Hank Gallagher, listen to me. In 20 years of marriage, through every hardship and challenge, through pregnancies and raising children and building businesses and all the rest of it, I have never once regretted choosing you, not for a single moment, because you were right all those years ago. Money cannot buy what matters most. It cannot buy love or purpose or the satisfaction of a life well lived. It cannot buy the feeling of watching your children grow into good people or the pride of seeing students you taught go on to achieve their dreams. It cannot buy the comfort of growing old with someone who knows you completely and loves you anyway." She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and sweet. "You gave me all of that. You gave me a real life, a meaningful life, and I would choose it again, every single time." Hank's eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you. After all these years, I love you more than I did the day we married. I love you too. Always have, always will." They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, two people who had found in each other everything that mattered. The years ahead held uncertainties, challenges that neither could predict. But they would face them together, as they always had, bound by a love that had grown from an unexpected meeting in a dusty general store to something deep and lasting and true. Winifred Pierce Gallagher had been born to wealth, raised in luxury, educated in the finest schools. But she had found her real education in a small Nevada town, learning that the richest life was not one of material comfort, but one of love and purpose and connection. She had learned that sometimes you had to lose everything you thought you wanted to find what you actually needed. And what she needed, what she had found, was standing beside her every day, working beside her, building with her, growing old with her. In Hank Gallagher, she had found not just a husband but a true partner, someone who had shown her that courage was not just about grand gestures, but about the quiet daily choice to love and work and build something lasting. As they unsaddled the horses together, moving in the comfortable synchronization of 2 decades of partnership, Winifred smiled. Somewhere in San Francisco, there was a life she might have lived. A mansion, society balls, a marriage to someone suitable but unexciting. That life seemed like a dream now, something that had happened to someone else. This was real. This ranch, this family, this man. This was her life, the one she had chosen and built and loved, and she would not trade it for all the wealth in the world. The evening found the Gallagher family gathered around the dinner table as they did most nights when everyone was home. William, now 22 and confident in his role at the ranch, talked about the new breeding program he wanted to implement. The twins, 18 and full of energy, argued good-naturedly about something that had happened at school. Hank listened to his children with pride evident on his face, occasionally offering advice or asking questions. Winifred looked around the table at these people she loved, at the life they had created together, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. This was her wealth, not measured in dollars but in love, in family, in purpose and meaning. After dinner, when the children had scattered to their various evening activities, Winifred and Hank stood together on the porch watching the stars emerge. It was their ritual, this quiet time together at the end of each day. A time to reconnect, to share the events of their separate days, to simply be together. Catherine wrote, Winifred said. She is doing well in her studies, top of her class in anatomy. That is our girl. Always was the smartest one in the room. Hank's voice was full of pride. She gets that from both of us, your practical intelligence and my love of learning. She gets her determination from you, that stubborn refusal to let anyone tell her what she can or cannot do. Winifred laughed. I prefer to think of it as persistence rather than stubbornness. Whatever you call it, it served you well. Brought you here, did it not? Brought us together. That it did. They stood in comfortable silence, Hank's arm around Winifred's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. 20 years of marriage had made them fluent in these silences, comfortable with quiet companionship as much as conversation. I was thinking, Hank said eventually, about expanding the school. Your father mentioned he would be willing to fund a new building, something bigger that could accommodate more students. What do you think? I think that is a wonderful idea. The current building is bursting at the seams. We turn away children every year because we simply do not have room. She paused, but that would be a lot of work, planning, building, finding additional teachers. You have never shied away from work. No, I suppose I have not, she smiled. Marrying you taught me that. You showed me that work, real meaningful work, is not something to avoid but something to embrace, says the woman who was teaching school before she ever met me. I was volunteering, helping Mrs. Chen. It was not the same as really committing to it as a life's work. You taught me that, Hank. You showed me what it means to dedicate yourself to something, to take pride in work well done. He kissed the top of her head. We taught each other, I think. I learned from you too, about the importance of education, about using whatever resources you have to help others. about not being so stubborn and proud that you refuse help when it is offered. That was a hard lesson for you. It was, but necessary. You made me a better man, Winifred. And you made me a better woman, made me more than I ever could have been in San Francisco. They stayed on the porch until the stars were brilliant overhead, talking and planning and simply being together. When they finally went inside, it was hand in hand, the way they had walked through 20 years of life together. The seasons turned as they always did in Nevada. Hot summers gave way to cold winters and back again. The ranch prospered. The school expanded into its new building, funded by Winifred Pierce and built by volunteers from throughout the county. More children received educations that opened up possibilities their parents had never dreamed of. Catherine graduated from medical school and returned to Nevada to practice, one of the first female doctors in the state. She set up her practice in Winnemucca, providing care to people who had never had access to proper medical treatment. Winifred and Hank could not have been more proud. William married Sarah Mitchell's daughter, Elizabeth, a sweet girl who had grown up on a neighboring ranch and who loved the land as much as William did. They built a house on Gregory Ranch land and began their own family, giving Winifred and Hank their first grandchildren. The twins finished their education and found their own paths. Thomas became a lawyer, fighting for the rights of small ranchers and farmers against the big corporations moving into Nevada. James returned to Winnemucca as a teacher, taking over much of the day-to-day running of the school Winifred had founded. Through it all, Winifred and Hank remained the steady center of their growing family. They were the ones everyone came to for advice, for comfort, for wisdom gained through years of living and loving well. Their marriage was a model for their children, showing them what partnership and commitment really meant. William Pierce lived to see all his grandchildren grown and several great-grandchildren born. He died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 86, having long since turned over his San Francisco businesses to trusted managers so he could spend more time in Nevada with his family. His funeral was attended by hundreds, a testament to his generosity and the respect he had earned. But it was the small gathering afterward, family only, where Winifred truly mourned. "He gave me so much," she told Hank through her tears. "He let me go when he could have forced me to stay. He supported my choices even when they must have seemed crazy to him. He became not just my father but your friend, our children's grandfather. He gave us all so much." "He was a good man," Hank agreed. "And he got to see his daughter build an amazing life. That must have meant the world to him." "I hope so. I hope he knew how grateful I was. He knew. He told me once near the end that watching you thrive out here was his greatest achievement. He said he made a lot of money in his life, but his real legacy was you." Winifred cried harder, but they were good tears, healing tears. Her father had lived a long, full life and had been loved until the end. That was all anyone could ask for. The years continued their march. Winifred's hair went fully gray, then white. Her hands grew more gnarled with age, though she stubbornly continued her work at the school until she was nearly 70. Hank's back bothered him more with each passing year, legacy of decades of physical labor. But he still rose every morning to check on the horses, to oversee the ranch operations, to do the work he loved. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The party was held at the ranch, under the open sky, with half of Winnemucca in attendance. People came from all over Nevada to honor the Gallaghers, this couple who had become legends in their own way. At one point in the evening, Winifred found herself alone for a moment, watching the celebration from the porch of their house. So many people, so much love, so much life that had sprung from one decision she had made 4 decades ago to stay in this dusty town and take a chance on a cowboy. Hank found her there, as he always seemed to when she needed him. He moved slower now, his joints stiff, but his eyes were the same whiskey color they had always been, still warm when they looked at her. "Quite a party," he said, settling beside her with a grunt. "Quite a life," she replied. "Any regrets?" She laughed. "After 40 years, you still ask me that?" "And after 40 years, I still cannot quite believe my luck. That you chose me, that you stayed, that we built all of this together." Winifred took his weathered hand in hers, their fingers intertwining automatically after 4 decades of practice. "Luck had nothing to do with it. I chose you because you showed me what really mattered in life, because you loved me for who I was, not what I represented, because you were real in a way no one in my old life ever was. I was a working cowboy with nothing to offer you. You were a man of integrity and kindness and courage. You had everything to offer me, everything that truly mattered. Money cannot buy what you have given me, Hank. It never could. You gave me purpose and love and a life of meaning. You gave me a family and a community where I belonged. You gave me the chance to become the person I was meant to be." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat together watching their family celebrate, watching the sun set over the desert they both loved. This was what it all came down to, Winifred thought. Not the grand gestures or dramatic moments, but these quiet times of connection, of love reaffirmed through years of living side by side. "I love you," she said softly. "After all these years, after everything we have been through, I love you more than ever. I love you too. Always have, always will." As the party continued around them, as their family laughed and celebrated, Winifred Pierce, Gallagher felt a peace so deep it transcended words. She had found what she had been searching for without knowing she was searching. She had found home, not in a place but in a person, in a life built on love and work and shared purpose. The wealthy heiress from San Francisco was long gone, replaced by someone stronger and truer. A woman who had learned that the greatest riches were not in bank accounts but in relationships, not in possessions but in purpose, not in what you had but in what you gave. And what she and Hank had given each other, what they had built together, was a legacy that would outlast them both. In their children and grandchildren, in the school that continued to educate new generations, in the ranch that stood as testament to honest work and integrity, in the love that had sustained them through 40 years and would endure long after they were gone. That night, after the last guests had left and the children had all gone home, Winifred and Hank prepared for bed in the house they had shared for 4 decades. They moved through their nightly routine with the ease of long practice, each knowing what the other needed without words. As they lay together in the darkness, Winifred felt Hank's arms come around her just as they had on their wedding night, just as they had on countless nights since. Some things never changed, she thought. Some things only grew deeper and stronger with time. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what? For being exactly who you are, for showing me what love really means, for building this life with me." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for taking a chance on a working cowboy, for seeing something in me worth staying for making every day of the last 40 years better than I ever imagined my life could be." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had defied every expectation to build something lasting and true. Two people who had learned that the greatest wealth was not in what you possessed, but in what you gave, not in where you came from, but in who you chose to become. The story of Winifred Pierce and Hank Gallagher would be told in Winnemucca for generations to come. The wealthy heiress who gave up everything for love, the working cowboy who showed her what really mattered. But for Winifred and Hank, it was simply their life, the one they had chosen and built together day by day, year by year, through joy and hardship, through every season of a long and well-lived partnership. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the dramatic beginnings or the social barriers they had crossed, but the simple truth of two people who loved each other and built a life on that love. A life that proved, beyond any doubt, that the greatest treasures cannot be bought with money, but are given freely between hearts that are open and brave enough to receive them. Their legacy lived on in the strong family they had raised, in the school that continued to change lives, in the ranch that still operated with integrity and care for both animals and land. But most of all, it lived on in the example they had set, showing everyone who knew them that love and purpose and meaningful work were the true measures of a wealthy life. Winifred Pierce Gallagher, who had once owned more money than most people in Winnemucca would see in a lifetime, found her greatest wealth in the strong arms of a cowboy, in the laughter of her children and grandchildren, in the satisfaction of work well done and a life fully lived. And that wealth, that true and lasting wealth, was something no amount of money could ever buy, no inheritance could ever match, no fortune could ever replace. It was earned through love and given freely, growing richer with each passing year, more valuable than all the gold in California, more precious than any treasure the world could offer. And that was the greatest gift of all.